I'm here with Rod Adams of Sunspot Farm in Fort Collins, Colorado. And so, Rod, can you tell us a little bit about maybe how you got into farming? And
Sunspot Urban Farm. It's owned by my wife and myself. We are the operators also. We don't have a farm manager. We're it.
Two-person operation.
Two-person operation with occasional help, important help from interns, from young people, college students that are friends of ours, that really are friends of ours because of the farm, which is a cool thing about the farm. We've met so many people over these past 11 years that we would otherwise not have known, and we've worked with many of them, getting our hands dirty, and we would never have worked with them, and we've gotten to know them, and it's been really a nice surprise to not just grow food, but also build relationships with people.
Mm-hmm. Kind of
food has that ability, right, to bring people together.
Yeah, everybody eats.
Because everybody eats and everybody values good food.
Yeah, yeah.
We have 3 high tunnels at our property near the river, which is almost 4 acres. And we have 3 high tunnels that are 50 feet long, 20 feet wide each. And we have 5 dedicated beds in each of those high tunnels that grow peppers and cucumbers and a variety of other crops.
Some squashes.
Yes, yeah, so the heat-loving plants, and
yeah.
They do so much better. We had grown all those crops, and still do grow some of those crops outside of those high tunnels, but they do so much better in those high tunnels. The production of Anaheim peppers and poblano peppers, we're really good at because of those high tunnels.
Yeah.
One of the cool things about our farm is that it's a CSA, and we know who we're growing for. We know before the growing season even begins who our members are. The 30 families that we grow for are the people that we're harvesting for throughout the season.
Yeah.
And I like that.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier about sort of the romantic notion of farming and the business side of farming, and they're 2 different extremes on a continuum. And I think Sunspot Urban Farm is somewhere in the middle. We got into it more for the sake of the romantic side of things.
Yeah. That's typically what draws people in. Yeah.
And
that'd be so cool.
But we also wanted it to be a business.
Yeah.
But we were completely naive. Really, we're sort of naive about both. And we didn't know how to run a business, and we didn't know how to grow food for people. We'd gardened for years. We knew how to grow some food for ourselves, but we weren't knowledgeable about growing at what we consider a large scale. This is a small farm,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But it's still, we consider it a large farm for 2 people to be operating, especially when one of them, my wife, she works full-time for U.S. Geological Survey. It's 1.5 acres of production. We own the land. We're doing it in the city. We have these 2 residential properties that are in what's called Old Town of Fort Collins, and most of our members are in walking distance or bicycling distance of the farm.
Super cool. Yeah.
And that allows them to minimize their carbon footprint as well. And by having distributions at the farm itself, and by having it consist of the members compiling their own bundle of food each week from what we lay out for them, it creates a social atmosphere, a community atmosphere, where people can come together once a week, every Thursday evening, and they see each other every week all summer long at this location. They can check in with each other, and their kids are playing together, and they're walking around the table where we have all the food laid out, and they're gathering up their shallots and the garlic and whatever while they're having conversations.
Rather than just they're showing up and picking up a box and heading out.
They have to do a little work.
Yeah, and a little bit more interaction, and and you're there for longer, and thus you're kind of able to talk to each other more.
And like this past Thursday, which was our first distribution for the season, one of our members wanted to create an appetizer for all the members.
Cool.
During the distribution. So we had that grill out front, and he was making bread, like a pita bread.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then he'd made a pesto out of our garlic scapes and some of our herbs, and he was putting that on the bread, and folks were walking around eating and gathering up their food and just conversing. We are trying with our little farm to have a big impact in terms of creating, I guess, two robust communities. One is the neighborhood community, and then the other is the soil community. We were talking earlier about how important roots are, and perhaps even more basic than that is the soil community. It's got to be really lively and diverse. And so we try to work on the soil. The soil takes care of the plants. Plants take care of us, and so we can take care of the soil again.
Yeah.
Did I get all the steps there?
You were showing. Yeah. You were showing me as I came in, like, this is what your soil used to look like, and that you were just fighting with it for years.
We would have fields of this rubble. I was telling you, we'd be pulling up because we have a small location, and we're trying to grow a lot of food. We say rework. That's the term we use. We rework a bed. Mm-hmm. We'll harvest from it, and then we'll rework it, and then we'll replant it. Hopefully that same day, if not, then at least the next day or the day after that. And in the early years, we started this in 2009. So in those early years, the soil tilth was terrible, and so we would work it really hard with shovels. We do everything by hand. And break it all up so it'd be powdery enough, and it was like powder, when it would break up, that we could plant in it. And then we would take the crop out, and then we would have this again, break it down. And our native soil is not conducive to gardening unless you're just really patient. And after a while I was running out of patience, so by year 4 I just thought, this is not getting any easier. It's not getting any better.
Doing this.
Well, and it wasn't just that I didn't want to do it.
The fact that you were starting over.
I felt like I never was improving. Like we weren't actually building up the ecology of the system. And that's part of like I was saying, we're trying to improve neighborhood relations, the human community and the soil community, and we weren't helping the soil community at all, obviously. And so, as I mentioned to you earlier, tree leaves were the key. Mm-hmm. And so we just inundate the fields with tree leaves, and we try to, so in the fall we'll put on several feet of tree leaves on all the beds and in all the aisles, just the entire property, and folks will show up. So all our members bring us their tree leaves, but then all their neighbors, their friends, people that have just heard about us, they bring us their tree leaves, and folks will show up with their big truckload of tree leaves, and they'll look around and they'll see tree leaves everywhere, and they'll say, "You really want more tree leaves? Mm-hmm. Yes, please bring us more."
Keep it coming.
And that has been really the key. So now we have good tilth, and it's pleasurable flipping a bed. I can rework a bed within an hour.
Nice.
And add some minerals, and it's ready to either direct seed or put in transplants that we've already started from seed from a few weeks earlier.
An hour of work, so not only less labor there, but also that hour of work is probably much less strenuous.
Oh, yeah.
In and of itself.
It's pleasurable.
Yeah.
And part of the pleasure is just when I'm doing it, like yesterday, we had harvested one of our 12-foot long, I think it's a 10-foot long box, 10 by 5, and it was full of lettuce. And we harvested that for our Thursday distribution. Everybody got 2 heads of lettuce. And so we took out all the lettuce. Yesterday, Friday, there's the bare bed. I got our broad fork out, which is, will your students know what a broad fork is? Okay,
they better.
I got a broad fork out. Spent maybe 5 minutes on that, and then put in some kelp powder, put in a pellet that is The NPK rating is like 540, I think, something like that. And got the triangle hoe, cut in little trenches, and then seeded 5 different kinds of radishes. And it didn't take a lot of energy of my, it didn't take any non-human energy. It just took some energy of mine, and then probably an hour I had it all done.
Yeah.
And it was pleasurable because it's just pleasurable to garden. And it was a beautiful day. Plus, I could remember, this would have taken me hours and hours, and probably 2 or 3 people.
And now you're barely breaking a sweat.
Yeah, and I'm doing it by myself.
I'm working, but
not working so hard.
Yeah.
In the early years, the working so hard actually was kind of confirmation to me that I'm farming, because I'm working hard.
Yep.
And then after a while, I thought, this is kind of stupid. And when I heard from other farmers that the worms can do all that tilling, Rod, and actually by my being so disruptive of the soil, I'm actually setting back the fungal community, which is so important for feeding the roots of the plants. Then I realized, okay, I've been doing this all wrong. No surprise, I didn't have any training in gardening. Yeah, students, pay attention to your teachers, right? Neither my wife nor I had anything other than ambition when we started gardening at the scale that we're doing now. I think the impetus for our growing our own food is the same impetus that inspired us to scale up.
Okay.
I think this is going to be true. Let me see how this goes. So in 2001, we bought this house. It was our first house, and it was surrounded by Kentucky bluegrass and really nothing else. We decided that we wanted to be able to eat our yard. We started putting in lots of herbs and various kinds of fruiting plants like raspberries, and I guess we were inspired by trying to make the best use of our resources, and in this case we were focusing on water. And as the years went by, we just kept taking out more and more of the lawn and putting in apple trees and cherry trees and a variety of perennials that were just beautiful plants that didn't need a lot of water, and they provided lots of flowers for the bees. Then I broke my neck in a car accident. So I mentioned my wife works for USGS. I was working seasonally for USGS in the summertime. So when I wasn't teaching my philosophy classes at the college, I would work with birds, wild birds, doing different kinds of field research. I was just a field tech. And while doing that one summer in Wyoming in 2008, I was driving west on I-80, and I had a blowout in the USGS Suburban truck that was full of equipment. And I did exactly what one should not do when one has a blowout, I've learned. I didn't know this at the time. I didn't know I was having a blowout at the time. I just knew things felt really weird, and I wanted to stop and get off the highway. So I hit the brakes, and then I spun around. Hitting the brakes was the intentional part. The spinning around was not intentional. I just realized, okay, now I'm totally out of control. And now I'm rolling, and now I've stopped. And I'm just surrounded by this weird light because it was the middle of the day. It was hot, sunny, summer day, and there's dust in the air, right? And so the sunlight's coming through the dust, and I felt like, am I in heaven? This is really weird. And I was fully aware of what was going on. I knew I'd lost control of the vehicle, and I was rolling, and now I've stopped, and things probably are going to be really messed up. Hopefully not too bad. But things like this don't normally happen to me. I really can't believe this happened, and my neck kind of hurts. And it turns out I had broken C1 in 2 places. And an ambulance came and took me to the hospital. Long story. obviously I've recovered fully.
Yeah.
I was told by the doctor I'm really good at breaking my neck. I did it in exactly the right way to be able to recover fully. While I was recovering, my wife, when the accident happened, was on the other side of the planet, as she is right now. When she got back, I was in a neck brace, and I was in a neck brace for 8 weeks, and then I went through rehab, and I fully recovered. And I still do my neck exercises every morning and take good care of myself. And we said, okay, we're reminded, we're mortal. Things could have turned out very differently. I could be paralyzed, I could be dead. We've always wanted to farm. Let's farm. We have this little bit of land. We know how to grow food for ourselves. Let's grow for more people. And so the same idea of wanting to make the best use of what we had for food production was the same thing that was inspiring us to just to ramp up and grow for more people and to try and grow for people in the neighborhood. And so that was in 2008 when I had the accident. At the end of 2008, we took a 8-week class on running a farm business. It was a course offered by Cooperative Extension from Boulder County, just the next county over. Mm-hmm. We started out with 6.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
And
yeah, a 30-member CSA is nothing to scoff at. Like,
yeah.
That's a pretty good size.
And yeah, and I don't want it to get any bigger. I kind of wanted it to get smaller this year, but in the spring, as we always do, we sent out our subscription letter to our former members, and they all signed up again. So we have the same folks. But it has been kind of the case. Many of our members have been part of the farm from the beginning. So that first year, I said we started with 6. We actually ended that first year with 15.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I wanted to share with you a sense for what we give to our members during a weekly distribution. This is from last year. This is when things are starting to peak. This was the 9th distribution, so this was on the 23rd of August. Okay. And we gave a bag of roasted poblano peppers. So this is per family, right? Yeah, so each family would get a bag of roasted poblano peppers, a bag of, so 1.8 pounds of fingerling potatoes, 0.84 pounds of green beans, so some tomatoes, I don't understand my own notes, a small hot pepper, a bunch of kale or collards or chard, a bunch of arugula, 4 yellow squash, 3 zucchini, 3 garlic, 4 shallots, 2 cucumbers, and then a choice item of either eggplant or basil, and then another choice item of either beets or okra or carrots or cauliflower. And then we always have picklers, so the pickling cucumbers. We never make those part of the share. We just have a big pile of pickling cucumbers, and people just take whatever they want. Cool. Because we always have more pickling cucumbers than we need.
But not everybody's going to pickle, and the people who do pickle, they're going to, want a decent amount.
Right, or they want to pickle this week, but not next week. And,
okay.
Yeah, and some just never pickle at all.
Yeah.
And then some pickle every week, like us. I love pickles. We did strawberries for a while. We went really all in with strawberries for a few years, and we don't do that anymore. We still grow some strawberries, mostly just for ourselves.
Why'd you drop them?
Well, it was just taking too much time, and we were growing them in one of those high tunnels that I showed you before, and it just gets way too hot in there. And we've never taken the effort to establish a really big strawberry patch outside of that.
Like too hot for the strawberries, or too hot for you to like?
Too hot for the strawberries. They want to be about 85 degrees. Yeah. And it gets regularly 120 degrees in there. And so, for the 3 years we did that. We actually did it as part of a USDA research project. We were growing in the ground and also in these suspended, we call them gutters. Full of potting mix, and doing that in the greenhouse, and we had to work so hard to try and keep the temperature low. We never really achieved it. We grew a lot of strawberries, but they weren't optimal. Anyway, we don't do berries anymore. We just do vegetables. what was it like? It was unpleasant. It was shocking. It was difficult and frustrating. We were making stuff up along the way. When we realized we need to start taking records, making good records of what we're doing, because we rotate our beds as part of our pest management procedure, right? So we try, I think we succeed actually, in never planting a crop from the same family in the same bed in successive years or successive rotations. I think I mentioned that we rotate our beds, rework our beds multiple times in a season. But sometimes we forget, well, what did we grow in this bed last year? God, it was just last year, we should remember.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much you can forget and how quickly you can forget. So we'll be working on something, we think, okay, we're putting in these 3 varieties of peas or whatever. And we'll remember which ones are which. A week later, which one's which, where? And so now we keep really good records. That's what these binders are about. We have probably 20 binders that we use to keep records of things. You were about to say something.
That was one of my big lessons from my graduate program. There was a magnet on a fridge in the lab where I was doing all my soil samples, and it said, the biggest lie I tell myself is, I'll remember, I don't need to write that down.
Yes.
And that changed things for me pretty big time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and it's not because we have defective memories. It's just because there's so much minutia.
Yeah, there's
to
too
remember.
much going on.
Yeah. Did I add minerals to that bed? Which minerals did I add to that bed? Yeah.
And so you're also pointing out some, or you're kind of hinting at, like, it's not only keeping records, but referring back to those records.
Oh, yeah.
Because simply keeping records is wasting time and space unless you're referring to them and using them.
Yeah. Yeah, like with beets. So when did we plant those beets? Because that determines when we need to pull them out, right? So we look at our records. And even just the record keeping, we've done record keeping in really burdensome ways that now we've streamlined.
Yeah.
And so it's much more efficient.
What would be one of the things that, like, you've changed? Because obviously, you have to be judicious in choosing. You can record everything, and then you end up spending all your time simply recording, and you can't do that either.
Yeah. Just the basic idea is, if we can get more information on one page for that bed, we'll do that. Like organizing a binder for minerals, a binder for a calendar for when pests arrive for different crops, a binder for like when we've started plants. We've consolidated a lot of those things. Sorry, my throat keeps getting a frog in it. So like now, when I'll show you. Well, another is like the work log. I used to write every little detail of what I did that day, and now I just write a word. Like I added leaves. I'll just put leaves to the bed or something. Like bed maps. We've got little sheets for each area of our beds. Like this is one portion of the backyard next door, and I'll write in what we either direct seeded or transplanted and the date that we put it in. I used to put the date somewhere else. It's a dumb thing. It's just so easy to put it there. And I used to record information, like I was already suggesting, that I don't really need. So when we flip beds, I'll put, like, where's an example? Maybe last year. So for a bed, we had shallots in, so I'll put shallots 1, meaning that was the first crop that we had in the bed. And then shelling peas 2, meaning that went in after the shallots. And then I write in at the end of the season, right next to the shallots 1, I put good, because it was a good crop. Shelling peas 2, fail. I just write in that word, right? So I can look at it quickly. Earwig pressure high for the whole season. I just write that up there at the end of the year. So it's all together on one page for that portion of the garden. So beds 0, we actually have a bed called 0 through 7.
Yeah.
And just little coding like that. We used to have labels in the beds for each crop, and by the time the information would become useful, they'd faded. So we couldn't read what they were. So now I know just to write it into these sheets. I don't know if this is actually answering the question that you have.
I like having how you're pointing out, like having all the info in the one place rather than categorizing it too widely and saying like, you know, seeding dates is in this folder versus anything else in another folder. It's like, no, just I want to know about the bed, and therefore everything about the bed is right here, and then everything about the next bed is in another place. Yeah,
you said that much better than I did. And we have this binder, which we just call crops. So for each, oops, here we go. Like for cabbage, this is just cut right out of the catalog from Johnny's. Pak choi. Eggplant information from Federally. Here's Johnny's again.
Yeah, anything useful. That way you're not looking it up all the time. It's just like I know.
Yeah, I know where to go
here if I need to look at something.
And if we have any extra information that we like to know, we just write it in. The record keeping is really important, and then we have electronic record keeping for expenses that we try to keep up with all year long, so that in the down months in December and January, we have it all together, and then we can do our report. We have a city sales tax report that we need to make to the city of Fort Collins each January 20th. And so that's when we really make the numbers make sense. And then that prepares us for filing with the federal government. It seems most farms in the United States, we're not making a living farming. We're making some money farming, but we're not living from day to day off of that income. We work other jobs that make the farming possible. But we've made a profit every year except maybe the first year. So I think that's important.
Yeah.
And it's an important thing for your students to keep in mind. I don't know how many, I'm sure there are some, and I know of a couple here in town that are making a living farming. But we're not one of those couples.
Yeah. It's not common to have all your income from the farm, and typically a longer process as you're trying to transition away from external work to online.
Yeah, and we have that as a goal. And probably in 3 years we'll be able to do that.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, no profit the first year, totally typical. But profit every year after that, and because you're tracking it, you're able to see how much profit there was, and you're like guiding it and trying to make it grow each time.
So some upsides are the heat island effect. The crops are exposed to warmer nights here than they are at our distant location, which is near the river, and the crops there grow slower, except the ones in the greenhouses. So other than those high tunnels, the surrounding beds at that distant property, those are much cooler, and they get started later in the season and they end earlier in the season. So yeah, we get benefit from all these roads and driveways and sidewalks collecting heat. We have some wind mitigation here just from all the buildings. The wind out there can be horrendous. But in terms of other things like hail, it's just we get hail out there, we get hail here, and sometimes it's really bad there, not here, and sometimes reverse. So advantages in that way aren't that different. Weed pressure is much greater out there than it is here. But we do have regular infusions of dandelion seeds from all of our neighbors here, and we don't really have that dandelion pressure so much at the other property. Other differences, upsides here, we have what's called a community compost hub. As far as I know, we're the only participants anymore. They started out with, I think, 3 locations. The idea was to have in every neighborhood a composting area that wasn't owned by the city. It would be owned by a private individual. But neighbors would be able to come and bring their compost, their kitchen waste, to the composting area. Folks that are not members of our CSA, and folks we didn't even know, they just found out from the city website that we're a compost hub, and they just bring their kitchen waste and bury it themselves into our pile, and they walk away quietly. And sometimes we get to meet them, and sometimes we never see them coming or going. So that's a cool thing.
Yeah.
That we're not just participating in growing food for our members, we're also a farm in the city where people can bring their kitchen waste and try to do what in their mind, and in my mind too, is the right thing to do.
Yeah, kind of help close that loop a little bit.
Yeah, instead of landfilling compostable food, just turn it into something that can be used for growing food. So we use the results of the compost pile once it's mature. We put that on our garden beds in the spring, or when we were reworking a bed mid-season.
You're getting some of your members just because they're passing by and finding out that you're growing food right here. And like, well, if I can bike by it today, then maybe I can pick up food some other time.
Oh, yeah. Fort Collins is a biker-friendly town, and we're located in a pretty busy area. I don't know if your students can hear, but there's constant car traffic. We're at the intersection, just off the intersection of 2 major streets in Fort Collins. And so there's a lot of activity. People are driving by. We've even had school bus drivers drive by and stop and open that door and say, "What are you all doing? This is so cool." People bicycle by, walk by, run by, drive by, and want to know what we're doing.
That's awesome.
And rarely, I don't know if it's ever happened that any of those contacts have turned into members, because we stay full.
Yeah.
Our membership stays full. We've never advertised. We've never formally advertised. It's all been word of mouth.
Yeah, you're avoiding a pretty decent expense, the marketing, the advertising, like they're finding you, and that's definitely a benefit.
Yeah. And then those folks, our current members, this happened on Thursday in 2 different occasions. Folks said, "Do you still have some spots? Because I've got a friend who wants to be part of the farm," right? So I like that. It's just one example of how we're trying to build community, human community. And we're not just, there's nothing wrong with advertising if it has to be done. But I like that it's word of mouth promotion, and we're not even pushing it. Other people are, because they think it's a cool thing.
Yeah, it's kind of reaffirming, right? Like it lets you know
we must be doing a good thing. People like it.
Yeah, it's probably nice to know that, like, if you do kind of find a way to step up the intensity, or do have a bit of a better season or something, kind of always got that potential, like add on a couple more people or something like that.
And we have done that before.
Yeah,
added a few people mid-season. So those are all upsides to growing in the urban environment. And I think the novelty of it also just piques people's curiosity. So you're growing food in town? When people bring us their leaves and we've never seen them before, these people, and we give them a tour.
Yeah, cool.
Right? Yeah. They're curious about what's going on. Even people that will come and fix our plumbing or something, they say, "Wow, you got quite a garden." So then we tell them about the CSA. It just spreads the idea further. Not that they will ever be members of our CSA, but they may start with themselves or share the idea with their daughter or something. Or, do you know what I mean? It just spreads the idea.
Yeah.
So
part of the broader movement.
Yeah. So we want to I guess, facilitate that sort of risk-taking to try and do something good. Because I think many of us have those idle dreams that we've never acted on, and then we see somebody else doing something, we're inspired. It took us a while to be able to say that we're a farm. Especially, things have changed now in 2019. In 2008, when we first concocted the idea, farm meant you have 1,000 acres and you grow 2 crops, one at a time, right? You know, and you sell them to China.
Yeah.
And you have enormous tractors and huge silos and huge barns, and it's a family operation. We've been doing this for 4 generations, right? We didn't have any background in farming. We didn't have any land. We didn't have any skills. We didn't have any equipment. We didn't have any interest in getting any of that. We're doing what we can to address the climate change problem. So I think that, along with the demonstration of fulfilling your dreams, we're trying to do both of those things as a good contribution to society. There's also this other surprising benefit of trying to urban farm, which is it has really elevated my appreciation for food and for what it takes to make food happen, right? Some folks have said, they see our garden and they see all this food production in the summertime and say, well, do you ever go grocery shopping? Well, yeah, we do. We like tortillas, we're not going to make them. We're not growing grains. And we like olives, So, and we're not trying to be self-sufficient. We're trying to demonstrate how you can grow a lot of food, and not just for yourself, but for others too. And you mentioned rabbits that you have a problem with sometimes, and we've got rabbits in our neighborhood. I'm learning how I'm not in charge of the garden. I'm not in charge of the farm. Ultimately, I can't stop the hail, but we can do things to try and be prepared for when the hail comes, or when the really cold weather comes, or when no rain comes, right? We can make adjustments. One thing that you and I haven't talked about that perhaps you're already familiar with, when we were walking around the different beds, you would have noticed the hoops and the netting. We had that for hail. It's to keep the hail off. Yeah, and it was demonstrated to me, and it's been demonstrated to me many times, but most recently it was last Thursday, so not 2 days ago, but the previous Thursday, about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The clouds got dark, they rolled in, we heard the thunder, saw the lightning, and then the hail started falling. And it was like being in a pinball machine. There was hail popping off those nets, it'd been bouncing like 5 feet in the air.
Even though it's because it's bird netting, and so they're about centimeters.
It's 2 layers of bird netting. Okay. So that there's some offsetting.
Yeah. Okay.
So some goes through, very little. It's less than 50% that goes straight through, and some that does go through is getting deflected
and slowed down, so it's not just tearing a hole through like a meteor coming down here.
Yeah, and some of these hailstones, it was variable sizes. So the biggest ones were the biggest I'd seen in years, and I thought they were going to rip right through the nets, and they just bounced off.
Wow. I saw that netting, but I just presume, it's bird netting. You're using it for birds.
Right. It's bird netting that we use for hail.
Cool. Awesome. Wow.
Yeah. So 2009, first year, we had all our crops in. It was June. It was June 6th. It was a Saturday. Friends came over to celebrate with us, with our exhausted bodies, that we had made all the beds and we had put plants in, all from seed, right? We didn't buy plants. We start everything from seed, or we direct seed. And so they were all congratulating us. We toured around and hung out and chatted for a couple hours, and then they left. And then about 2 hours later, the sky got dark, and we got hailed on for an hour. I could almost cry right now. It was devastating. And we ran around with bicycle helmets on, throwing towels on beds, and where we could do it, we saved some crops. We saved some plants, some individual plants, but it was just a complete wipeout.
Especially like first year.
Oh yeah, and I couldn't really talk. I can barely talk about it now. It's 10 years ago, I couldn't talk at the time, and not because I'd lost my voice. I just was devastated. I don't remember what the question was now. I'm totally distracted by the woes of farming with hail.
Benefits and detriments to the urban environment. So you went over some of the benefits, and obviously hail is not an urban thing. Have there been things that you've noticed about, like, because of your urban location, like some more detriments
we have
or
trash.
drawbacks?
We have trash. There's a 7-Eleven, I think it is, a convenience store, just like 4 houses away across the street at the corner, and we get their trash.
Just blowing in?
Just blowing in. I think it's usually blowing in. Maybe some people deposit the stuff. There's a lot of foot traffic in the area, and cigarette butts, but it's fairly minor. We don't have any trash problems at the other property, which is more secluded. It's more outside the city. It is outside the city. I'll probably think of some really good downsides to being in an urban area later. They're not really coming to mind. Oftentimes when I'm out at the other property, which has some great benefits too, when I come back into town to our home where we live, everything here seems so much softer. Just the light seems softer. The beds seem softer. It's really harsh out there.
A bit more tame or domesticated.
It's so tame here. It's so domesticated. Yeah, we've got this nice perimeter around both properties of vegetation. So the lighting is more gentle here. These sheds that I've built are just in better repair here than they are at the other property. And I mentioned weeds. Part of it, I think, is just the weeds. I really battle weeds out at the other property. Bindweed and thistles. Yeah. Really just those two. We don't really have much of a pest problem out there. We probably have more of a pest problem in town. So there is a nutrition science class offered at CSU by a professor named Gary Auld, and he has his students, they have to tour a farm, a local urban farm, and they have to work 15 hours at a farm. And so we had, I think, 6 or 7 young people, students of his class, the past several years, work with us. And this past year, a few of the really studious students were getting near their 15 hours with me, and they knew they had to write a report about it. And so they were asking me the questions that they would need to address in their paper to their professor. And one of the questions was, what would you want more of? And I said, knowledge. I want to know how to grow all these crops better. Better meaning more abundantly, more efficiently, right? With less failures. And they were expecting me to say, I want more members, or I need more income, or I need more money up front, or something like that. But I just want more knowledge. So I feel like the biggest obstacle I have, and the obstacle that I foresee, will continue to be the one I've been having, which is I feel like if I had interned at farms prior to starting this venture, I would better know how to run the farm more productively. There are a number of things I do, that Amy and I do, that I think cannot be best practices in terms of wise use of one's time. You know, going out each night with a headlamp and picking off slugs and earwigs and caterpillars seems like something that no other farmer would do. That's just one example. There are things, in terms of sequencing our crops in beds. We're not very systematic about that. We try to be. I think that's a problem. I would like to be able to have enough knowledge about our system, I guess, to make a plan in the spring and have it be a wise plan from day one, and we just stick to it.
Well, let me console you a bit and say that, like, you know, if you've heard from things like what Dwight Eisenhower was like.
The great farmer, Dwight Eisenhower?
No, but the great general, Dwight Eisenhower.
Right,
He's like,
I understand.
Plans count for nothing, but planning is everything.
Oh, interesting.
And so, or like, no plan survives contact with the enemy. And so, you don't have like enemy necessarily, but the idea that
conditions change.
The real world, things change, and so it's not going to follow that plan. However, if you didn't do that planning, then you would be lost. You wouldn't have done your research. You wouldn't be as prepared to be making these decisions. And so, you're changing it and altering it and potentially not following it very much at all. But having it there means you've got the opportunity to not follow it, where otherwise, like, you'd just be utterly just planting willy-nilly and... Yeah.
I think you're right again. I do think you're right, because some mornings I wake up and I almost never know what I'm going to do for the day when I first wake up until I step outside into the gardens. Or I have a flashback of what I saw last night at the other property. Then I'll see what needs to get done. By having a plan, even if we don't keep it, I've got some kind of framework, so I'm not just completely starting fresh every morning, which I tend to do anyway. There is something to writing these things down and making some kind of plan and modifying it. So thank you for the consolation, but I still see that as an obstacle, something to overcome. That when we first started this, I thought by year 2 or 3 I'll have this down, and I was frustrated with myself because I feel like there's so many moving parts, and there's so many different crops, and each crop has multiple varieties that we try, and then just keeping track of where everything is. And many days, I don't do this so much anymore, but I remember when I would roll out of bed and I'd walk out into the garden, I think, oh God, there's like 1,000 things to do right now. And I just feel kind of, I wouldn't have a panic attack, that's way too extreme, but I just feel anxious, okay, I've got a lot of things to do right now. And sometimes I walk out and I think, I don't see anything that needs to be done. I'm sure there is something. What am I not noticing? I'm getting now into the 11th year. I'm getting a little more self-confident about that. But I didn't know it would take so many years to start feeling that way. And I'm just feeling like I know what I'm capable of doing in this day, and what needs to get done, and the things I won't be able to get to. So I prioritize. I'm feeling more confident about that. I still make some bad choices.
What are the
a lot of, in answer to your question, I think a lot of the things I'm thinking about have to do with me. Not in an egotistical way, but, just, and not to get new agey, but, also like a spiritual way. Like I need to, I'm growing up, I'm maturing in a variety of ways that I never would have matured, I don't think, if I hadn't tried to grow food.
Interesting, yeah.
Being, at least I hold myself morally responsible for taking care of these plants, because I hold myself morally responsible for taking care of the commitment that our members have made to our farm, and so I want to nurture these things, and I'm trying to be the best at tending these crops as I can be. So there's always room for improvement. So I feel like the obstacles, in answer to your question about obstacles I see in the future, they still have to do with me. In being able to just remain calm, don't get frustrated, right? Don't get overwhelmed. Don't get resentful of the cucumber beetles. Silly things. When I say it that way, it sounds silly, but that's how it feels. Yeah. Like, would you just please leave those plants alone?
Yeah. Feels like they're attacking you.
So I'm learning more and more, and still have a lot more to learn about being able to just appreciate the system that I'm really interfering with. in certain ways. I'm trying to guide things in a certain direction, and sometimes it's not going to go that direction.
Well, yeah, you told me the quote from Michael Pollan, nature abhors the garden. And so here you are trying to, kind of, force might be too forceful a word, but like you're trying to make it happen.
Yeah.
And it's resisting.
Yeah. I don't probably read them as much as I should. As I should. At this time of the year, most of the learning I'm doing is happening in the field.
Yeah.
That's where I spend all my days. And then sometimes if I have the time and the energy or the strong enough curiosity, I'll look something up. And I use the internet, sometimes. Like I was just thinking about parsnips. I feel like this is too late in the season to start planting parsnips. Am I right? And I would just go on the internet and just gardening, parsnips, timing, and look at a few of the first hits and see what they have to say. The extension services from the different universities are sometimes helpful with different kinds of pest control. I was at Red Rocks amphitheater for a concert, my first at Red Rocks recently to see Michael Franti. And as we were all in line waiting to go in, we'd go up the steps, right off to the side there were these 2 or 3 just enormous bull thistles. I think they were bull thistles. Just starting to flower. I so wanted to cut them down. I didn't have any gloves or anything, and also I just felt like that would be the wrong thing to do, to jump over the railing and go pull those plants, because some people might think, oh, don't kill those plants.
Don't notice,
but whenever I think of Red Rocks now, I think of those plants. Seeds are just about to go everywhere.
Yeah.
Intern first somewhere else.
Yeah,
I think.
Get your experience in someone else's place.
Yeah.
Learn their mistakes, because there's plenty of mistakes for you to make yourself. So try and get some of theirs out of the way. And
you should get some experience growing food at large scale from people who have been doing it for a while. This is maybe just a pipe dream, but try to own your land.
Yeah.
Wait until you have some money to buy some land before you start your urban farm. I don't know this from experience, but I imagine that and I've seen it happen around here, from some really good growers, they invest in the land, they make it work, and then they get booted off.
Yeah.
The owner doesn't want them to farm there anymore.
It's hard to...
And they're giving part of their proceeds, their profits, to rent.
Yeah.
And they're not getting any equity in that land when they're farming it.
Yeah.
So, if it's possible, grow on land that you own, or at least paying a mortgage on. That would be advice. And try to get really clear on what you're wanting to accomplish. Are you trying to get rich quick? Do something else. If you're trying to get rich, do something else. Whether you're going to get rich quickly or not ever at all. Get clear on what motivates you. Well, I would recommend Acres USA.
Okay.
And there may be better publications than that for your students that I'm not aware of. Our friends who run Native Hill Farm, which I think is the most successful urban farm in the area, they're making a living at doing it. And they grow as a CSA, really large CSA, at least 100 members. And they do a winter CSA as well, using root crops from plants that they, from roots that they grew in the spring, in the summer. And they also have restaurant accounts and at least one grocery store account. They go to something called Moses, I think. So some kind of conference each spring or each winter that they think is really helpful. And then they listen to a variety of podcasts that they've told me the names of. I don't remember. I've never used them. But I think having that kind of wealth of information coming from other directions, from other experts in the field, knowing that, having that sort of in place before you start, I think could be helpful. We didn't have any of that. We really didn't know it was going to be such a difficult thing to grow food.
Well, maybe it was a good thing, just so that you started.
Well, we might have been psyched out,
right?
Yeah, and, yeah. I mean, we always sort of were psyched out. It was the breaking my neck that gave us the courage, because we said, "Well, what are we waiting for?" Yeah. You know, it's always going to be a risk, so let's just take the risk, because we might not get next year. We don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. We might be in a car accident that doesn't end out, doesn't turn out so well as this one did. So I would say, yeah. Also, know what's going on in your area. What other farms are around? What are they growing? What are they specializing in? Mm-hmm. Is there room for another urban farm? Is there a market? Is that the word I want? Are there more customers looking for a CSA that haven't been able to have their needs satisfied yet by the existing CSAs? Yeah. Or even if it's not a CSA, you just said urban farm, not necessarily a CSA. Yeah, figure out what is it like growing for restaurants. Talk to the restaurants. Are there restaurants in town that are committed to the farm to table idea? Yeah, we went all this advice I'm giving. We didn't follow any of it. It didn't even occur to us. We just wanted to do it. Yeah. And we thought things will fall into place. And all these binders and stuff, all this planning that we do, even if we don't follow all the plans, I don't know how we did it originally. And still, I kind of don't know how we do it. I don't really want to think too much about why it works out, because I might mess up the system. Because right now it just sort of works intuitively. Yeah, we kind of end up with the right amount of food. This year, more than any other, we're planting. We have more beds than we've ever had, and we're planting more varieties of crops than we ever have. As I've been saying, there are lots of advantages to the CSA. One disadvantage is the money's already committed, right? So the obligation's there to provide. Yeah. And so I feel all season long, are we going to be able to satisfy that obligation? And our members are such good people, such kind people. They'd be fine if we had a bad season in this crop or that crop.
Didn't make it.
But I'd feel bad.
Yeah.
Right? And so I do everything I can to make sure that we succeed in all these different areas. And that kind of pressure I don't really relish, but I'm getting better at managing it as the years go by. So I guess one of my pieces of advice is be ready to learn not just about how to grow food, but learn about yourself, right?
There you go, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you might not like some of the things you learn about yourself. I haven't. I've had to adjust a variety of things about how I look at the world and how I look at myself. I think it's for the better. And I didn't know how hard I could work. I've always considered myself a hard worker. I didn't know I could work this hard. Yeah. I thought of a few more things about the biggest challenge on the horizon for urban farming. Yeah. At least around here, water.
Yeah.
There's more and more demands placed on Colorado water as the city populations keep growing. People move to Colorado, and
well, not only that, but like so much of it is slated for other states.
Right. Yeah. Colorado has commitments to other states for downstream. Yeah, all of our water for Colorado comes from the sky. And with climate change, I don't know. Nobody knows, but climate scientists have a good sense for what's going to happen. And
greater extremes.
Yeah. And so right now we have an abundance of water. We've been getting lots of rain and snow in the past couple months. But with climate change, I don't know what's going to be coming down the pike in the future years in regard to getting snow and rain in Colorado. Land ownership and affordability. Again, because so many people are moving to Colorado, real estate prices are going up everywhere. They're really high here in Fort Collins. We keep thinking they can't go any higher, and they keep going higher.
Yeah.
Because the demand is so great. People need a place to live, and they want to live in Colorado. And, I don't know how young people can get into farming if they're not inheriting land from a family.
Yeah.
So that's a big challenge for urban farming, it seems to me. Get a sense by talking to other farmers what kind of infrastructure is necessary. Amy and I had no idea. I mean, even just refrigeration. We were using our refrigerator, like our kitchen refrigerator originally. And then we realized, oh, we need another one. We need another one. We've got 4 refrigerators, right? And 2 of them are all refrigerators. There's no freezer part, you know. And then we could use a 5th. And then there's just all the infrastructure of the hoops and the nets and all the drip tape and just making the raised beds. You know, those big boxes. It all is labor intensive and expensive. And we got piles of rebar that we would buy in these 10-foot lengths, and then I cut with a hacksaw. I mean, I did things labor intensive ways. So much stuff. There's so much infrastructure. These hoop houses. Yeah, it's sheds. Just have a place to store stuff. I had no idea.
All this stuff that's like not farming or not the vegetables, and yet it's still needed.
But yeah, like this potting shed, which I think it turned out beautifully.
Yeah, it's really good.
It's all windows that are reused. That stores all kinds of stuff that I don't know where I'd store it if I didn't have that. And then the tool shed just over there, the tall tool shed that I built maybe 5 years ago because we had so much equipment that we needed to store. So that's just another thing for, I don't know, an new urban farmer to think about. It's not just about growing food. It's about having all this stuff that makes it possible for you to have it and harvest it and store it, and then you need a place where you can store all that stuff at the off season. You know what I mean?
It's something that I didn't see when I was going through, and it's too compartmentalized. Like you're not in business, and thus you're not taking business classes. You're just learning all about plants, all kinds of things about plants. But if you're trying to do something with it, you like thinking about infrastructure, thinking about accounting, thinking about marketing if you have to do it, and that's another the reason it's nice to avoid it. Like, not only are you avoiding the cost, but you're also another cost is the time that it takes you to learn how to do it and to do it well, and or the mistakes that happen from doing it poorly. On one hand, we're saying you need these business skills, but on the other, it is still different than most business, because a lot of that is incredibly systematized and streamlined and controlled, and you have an input and you do stuff to it, and then you have an output, and it's just like it happens within this warehouse, and you just like once you create the system, then it's just repeat
because you can control all those factors.
And then here, you've got like high rain this year, or a September hail, or like all kinds of different
or another
things.
Urban farm just opened up and they just took over half your members.
Yeah. There's a lot more going on. There's a lot of variables. We're looking at days to maturity with the crops. It's like, okay, an average of 52 days, but if I'm planting that in a high tunnel in March, it's going to take me 90 days or something. But if I plant that today, it's going to crop in 2.5 weeks or something like that, just boom.
Right.
Yeah, it's a big part of it too. It's not even, you don't even get to say, okay, this is its DTM and that's just what it is, and I'll plant this crop and then I'll plant this crop and then I'll plant this crop. It's like, no, you got to kind of like stagger them a bit tighter at the beginning and then spread them out, the opposite, a bit looser at the beginning because they're going to take longer to come out, and then you start really, like your lettuces, you're just planting that all the time because you're harvesting it all the time because it's growing really fast, and you got to get it harvested and out of there because it's going to bolt in a second.
Right. Yeah, I was completely naive to all that. I thought you plant your garden and then you just enjoy it for the entire summer.
And then you just wait, and then there it is, and you just walk around and you just pick tomatoes, and everything's gravy.
Yeah, why isn't it that way?
Living things.
Yeah. So it's cool that you're offering this course.
Thanks.
Courses.
Yeah,
it's a set of courses. Yeah. And your students are lucky. Yeah.
I hope they see it that way as well.
Yeah, I hope so too. Our membership is almost entirely middle to upper middle class.
Yeah.
They're all white.
Yeah.
They're all heterosexuals, families, husband and wife, couple kids. Some are not families. We've got some single individuals or just some couples. But yeah, it's not a diverse group at all. They're all highly educated, many with PhDs, almost all with some sort of graduate degree.
You're trying to run a sustainable farm, but sustainable for whom? Right? Like, it's for those who can afford it.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. I'm not complaining about these people. They're wonderful people.
For sure. There's nothing wrong with them, but it's like how it is that struggle of like trying to have a greater effect. And the people who need it most are the people that you're not really reaching.
Yeah. That's exactly what I'm trying to get at.
It's a struggle.
Yeah.
For sure.
I don't want it to change necessarily, because I really like these people. They're good to grow for. They're fun to be with. And many of them I knew from before. And they're friends. But it is interesting to recognize that, there's a large swath of the Fort Collins population that would benefit and enjoy being a member of our CSA, who will never be, because our membership was full every year from these same people. It sounds like I'm complaining. I'm not complaining. And you pointed out that I'm not complaining. But it's an issue, and it comes to mind when I think about the young people that I meet from the nutrition science class, because their interests often are toward serving the nutritional needs of underserved populations. And we're not addressing that. I mentioned to you one time a little while ago when we were driving out to the other property, the first CSA in Colorado, Happy Heart Farm, which was just down the road. It's still a farm, but it's under different management now. And in their final years, Happy Heart was working really ardently toward trying to address this problem. I guess it's a problem that I'm raising. They were wanting to get this kind of good locally grown produce into the hands of underserved populations, and they were making some progress with that. And I don't know where that stands now. I don't keep up with it. But it's something for your students to think about. And I guess it's one of the challenges for urban farming, because CSAs tend to be sort of upper class phenomenon. And if it's something to be guilty of, we're guilty of it.
I do know, I interviewed Sean Conway in Denver of Micro Farms, Colorado, and I forgot the name of the organization, but he has a CSA and he sells wholesale to a nonprofit who they themselves are kind of like a food aggregator for underserved, underprivileged communities.
Yeah.
And that's a way that he's able to do it. Ron Finley, I don't know if you know him, he's become a pretty big deal out of LA. The thing about sustainability is you got to sustain it. And so that his point is I'm not talking about giving things away for free. You still got to charge money, but that's where the nonprofit comes in. If there are those opportunities. He even said there was one time WIC, so Women, Infants, Children, ran a program. I think it was just 1 year, unfortunately. I'm sure like their funding ran out or something, but he got a bunch of families who WIC paid for their CSA membership. And so he was able to like actually serve some families who themselves couldn't really afford it, but he was still producing food for them.
Neat. Okay. And we've talked about doing something like that.
Yeah.
Amy and I, about having a kind of fund or scholarship for folks to either give them, and we've done this in a few cases, have reduced CSA fee, up front for some people.
It might be a potential, like kind of like if you've heard the permaculture principle of the problem is the solution. Maybe your upper middle class people can themselves overpay or help you sponsor additional shares. I don't know quite how it would work or not, but yeah, it's got to come from somewhere because somebody's got to pay for it, and it's if the farm's paying for it, there's not a long livelihood of the farm. The farm needs money coming in, and I mean it's difficult. It's definitely one of the biggest problems I think facing the movement, if you will.
I remember when we started, some people would ask us about giving our food to the food bank. And I would say, well, that sounds really nice, but I'm working too dang hard to produce this food to just give it away.
I'm not independently wealthy here.
We have donated food to different events, and we've given food to various friends who could have afforded it, but we didn't want to charge them because they were going through some health crises. Couple different families. So we've tried to do things like that in small ways. And what you've had to say is helpful. Amy and I just need to keep thinking about this and finding what other people do to give us ideas about how to address it. We really don't interact with people that are not like us. We're well-educated white heterosexuals, and that's kind of our circle of friends too.
And the neighborhood,
and the neighborhood is like
by
that.
virtue of the property prices. And
and the values of the houses keep going up, so it's going to stay this way for a while at least. We've done 2 different research grant projects that I'm glad we did, but I don't want to do any more of them.
What's that?
Sort of a distraction. On top of trying to learn how to grow for a CSA, we were doing some research. And we did the research well, we did the reports really well. But it took a lot of extra work when we didn't have the time for it. But we were committed to it. One was I think both of them were 3-year. One was a 2-year project, one was a 3-year project. And I don't want to do those again.
Just staying focused.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah. Thank you, Rob. Really appreciate it.